Welcome back to the series where I take a look at certain aspects of Pokemon and try to fix them. This time, we'll be taking a look at the evil team of Pokemon X and Y, Team Flare. And this team is known for being one of the most underwhelming in the series thus far. So here, I think I'll be looking at not only just the battles, but some of the aspects of the story as well. So I'll be walking through the game from start to finish, fixing various plot points and team comps along the way. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the first time the player runs into Team Flare is after getting their Kanto starter from Professor Sycamore in Lumiose City, when you run into Lysandre on your way out of the professor's building. And it's here where he introduces his idea to make a more beautiful world with his invention, the Holocaster. And on his way out, the Pross assistant Cinna wonders what kind of beautiful world he envisions, which acts as a great way to plant the seeds of the eventual quote-unquote twist villain that he becomes later on in the game, and this is only compacted further by his infamous interaction with Diantha in Café Soleil just moments later. But the first official Team Flare introduction exists all the way over in Glittering Cave, before the second gym, where the grunts levels are around 18 to 20, which simply feels too deep into the game for a first introduction. So here, back in Lumiose City, I'd like to double down on the game hinting at a connection between Lysandre and Team Flare by adding a small double battle with Team Flare grunts as you attempt to exit the city to Route 5, where they introduce Team Flare's motives to create a more beautiful world with that classic comedy flair that they're known for so well. Heck, you could even show that they're super big fans of Diantha in the same vein as Team Yell in Sword and Shield. And I want to take a moment here to talk about the kinds of Pokemon that Team Flare grunts are seen using throughout the game, because although they claim to be all about beauty, most of their Pokemon appear more cool and evil than anything else. With the Houndour, Zubat, Gulpin, Electrike, Scraggy, Krogunk, Poochyena, and Purloin lines. And yeah, you could argue that that's just the type of Pokemon that evil teams use, but in my opinion, it's one of the biggest reasons why this team flops so hard. They just don't do anything unique on their own in terms of events or Pokemon used. And that's not even mentioning the fact that they don't use a single Gen 6 Pokemon. So here I think something that could make them stand out a bit more is through using Pokemon that lean towards the theme of beauty, acting as more of a facade to their actual character and intentions. But honestly, I feel like the Houndour, Electrike, and Purloin lines still kind of fall within the realm of beauty and regality, so we'll keep those in the mix, alongside some new additions like Flabebe, Litleo, Roselia, Vespiquen, Raltsar-Gothita, Furfrou, and even Pidgeot, to name a few. So here in Lumiose, the grunts could sport a Flabebe and Litleo duo, both at level 11, with the Flabebe knowing Vine Whip, Tackle, Fairy Wind, and Lucky Chant, while the Litleo knowing Headbutt, Leer, Ember, and Work Up. Simple level up movesets with some sneaky setup potential to throw the player off guard on their way out of the big city. It always sort of baffled me that Team Flare grunts never used either of these Pokemon, since the Flabebe line is so integral to their vision of beauty, while the Litleo line shows a bit of the flair that they hope to present to the public, with Pyroar having different looks depending on their gender, much like the grunts themselves. So moving on, let's skip to the Glittering Cave, where the player gets a larger view of Team Flare grunts for the first time as they attempt to steal fossils, much like Team Rocket did all that time ago in the original games. But here, I find it somewhat lackluster that one of the 17 scientists that are part of Team Flare are not involved in some capacity. I think something I find interesting with evil team fights is how difficult they can be in the early game, like Commander Mars's Perugly in Pokemon Platinum. So we'll be bringing, what's her name? Wait, what are any of these scientists' name again? Oh, creations, how could you forget the name of the scientists? They're so memorable. Oh yeah? Go ahead, name all 5 of them right here, right now, youngster Joey. Okay, well, yeah, that's, Aliana, Brioni, Celosia, Mabel, and Xerosic. Youngster Joey, I can see Bulbapedia pulled up on your Rotom phone right now. Oh crap, you got me. Yeah, they're super forgettable. Yeah, exactly. And I think a big reason for that is the Pokemon they use. None of them use a single Pokemon Pokemon that seems memorable to me except for Xerosic's Malamar, with it being the only Gen 6 Mon here. And the majority of other Mons used have been on other evil teams in the past, just like the grunts, so I'll be changing these up for sure. But back to the Glittering Cave, I'm gonna be moving up Aliana's first fight from the Kalos power plant to here, giving us a much more interesting fight at a lower level cap where less Pokemon are available to the player. So Aliana will start out with a Floette at level 20 with Flower Veil and the moves Razor Leaf, Wish, Fairy Wind, and Lucky Charm. Then comes her ace of this new fight, a Diamond Hairstyle Furfrou to match her orange aesthetic at level 22 with Fur Coat and the moves Headbutt, Bite, Baby Doll Eyes, and Rock Smash as an in-lore way to show that the scientist has been studying the cave and collecting items and fossils with this TM, and might as well strap an Oranberry to this guy to help keep it alive even longer. Now this is what I call a good introduction. With an imposing Furfrou to stand in the player's way, Team Flare now poses a more interesting threat way earlier in the game. Much like how you pose a more interesting threat to that subscribe button if you like my content. So the next time the player interacts with Team Flare is on Route 10, right below Xerosic Town, the home of their secret hideout. And this confrontation simply involves a few grunts hanging about investigating the standing stones here, which does act as a simple foreshadow to their hideout location later in the game, but I think something that could work better is a confrontation with Lysandre, who would be found doing the same investigating and talks to you about how the region used to be so beautiful and has fallen from grace, as he might also mention the beauty that once resided here in these graves. You see, in the base game, the player fights Lysandre 3 times really close together, where his team doesn't show much variation. So I think including a debuffed fight with Lysandre before knowing that he's the leader of Team Flare could help the pacing of his fights while also cluing in the player on his involvement with Team Flare. And this fight would act pretty similar to Cyrus's first fight in Celestic Town. And in terms of Lysandre's original team, it shares a lot of overlap with Cyrus too, whose other Pokemon can actually be seen represented on Flare's scientists too, which also adds to this problem of originality and memorable moments in these fights. So we'll be changing this up a bit to make for a more unique squad of Pokemon here. So with this first new encounter with Lysandre, he'll send out a Pancham at level 25 with Iron Fist and the moves Slash, Power Up Punch, Circle Throw, and Rock Tomb for some fun coverage and speed control. Lysandre's Mienshao always felt like an odd inclusion to me, and while I do enjoy its design, it really didn't feel like it fit Lysandre's vibe too well. Pancham and Pangoro, on the other hand, gives a spot to an otherwise unused Gen 6 Pokemon to a major character and happens to fit Lysandre's goals and ambitions pretty well, as its Pokédex entry states that it charges ahead and bashes its opponents like a berserker, uncaring about any hits it might take. Much like how Lysandre doesn't really care about the ultimate weapon's use might impact the people of Kalos. Next up, Lysandre will send out a Sigilyph at level 24 with its hidden ability Tinted Lens and the moves Light Screen, Air Cutter, Psybeam, and Hypnosis for putting those pesky foes to sleep. I know Sigilyph feels like a weird inclusion here, but hear me out. Sigilyph is a Pokemon that is found only on this route, being situated right next to Xerosic Town, home of the ultimate weapon. And according to the Pokédex, Sigilyph are said to be guardians of an ancient city that always fly the same route while keeping watch for invaders, resembling those flying guardians from Breath of the Wild. I think Lysandre could have originally caught one of these guys to study those patterns in search of the ultimate weapon that could have been built upon a city by AZ all those years ago, and could be studying it further to use in his plan later on, but we'll get there soon. Anyways, Lysandre would then send out his new ace, Aron, at level 26 with Sturdy and the moves Rock Slide, Iron Head, Hone Claws, and Bulldoze. Although Aron's got a weak BST at this point in the game, he's definitely making up for it here with the potential Light Screen still set up from Sigilyph, and the Hone Claws accuracy buffs, and speed control from Bulldoze. And hey, might as well throw an Oranberry down on Aron too while we're at it. And that is the new Lysandre fight on Route 10, to have the player more acquainted with the guy at a lower level at a location that might clue the player in on his connection to Team Flare. Now it's time to move on to the slog that is known as the mid-game of Pokemon X and Y. And Team Flare is certainly not here to help speed things up, as we cut back to back to back between gym leaders and Team Flare scientists, pretty much up to the finale of the Team Flare story. So let's go ahead and get a move on in the Kalos Power Plant, where in the base game, the player is introduced to the first scientist, Aliana, who here is only sporting a single Mightyena with an interesting moveset to say the least. But seeing as we moved her up, I've decided that we're going to move up the next scientist, Brioni, to this spot, whose team in the base game is in dire need of some TLC. So with the pattern set by Aliana, Brioni will send out a yellow Florges at level 36 with Flower Veil and the moves Grassy Terrain, Magical Leaf, Wish, and Disarming Voice. With an upgraded evolution to the Flabebe line and a fun utility in Wish, this will be an interesting wall to try to get around. Next out is Brioni's Pawniard at level 35 with Defiant and the moves Assurance, Slash, Metal Claw, and Aerial Ace for fun coverage. While she does have a Bisharp in the base game, that's not until later at a higher level cap, and with its evolution level being 52, I think keeping it under evolved here is completely fine. Then comes out Brioni's new ace, a Roserade at level 37 with Poison Point and the moves Toxic Spikes, Giga Drain, Leech Seed, and Venoshock. With the potential of poisoning the player's mons with its ability, that boosted Venoshock is a scary powerful move to go up against, especially with the chance of having Grassy Terrain still up from her Florges with Roserade's Giga Drain. And if you haven't caught on by now, I'm attempting to match each scientist with a Pokemon that fits in their color theme. Oh, and to boost Roserade even further, I think throwing a Big Root to boost both Leech Seed and Giga Drain recovery to keep this flower alive even longer is the right play. And that is the new and improved Brioni fight, now found in the Kalos Power Plant. And the next scientist that the player comes across is actually both Brioni and Celosia in the Pokeball Factory, in a double battle against them with your rival Serena or Calum. And this fight is really underpowered with just two measly Pokemon, those being Liepard and Manectric at that. So they're gonna need a boost here. And seeing as we've moved Brioni to the Pokeball Factory, and I really like the fact that a double battle exists here, I think it'd be fine to throw a Team Flare admin into the mix as Celosia's doubles partner, as they're known to have slightly more powerful teams than just grunts. So this time, Celosia will start with a Florges of her own at level 41 with Flower Veil and the moves Flower Shield, Magical Leaf, Wish, and Dazzling Gleam for a much higher damage output than Brioni's. And if you haven't heard of Flower Shield, it raises the defense of all grass type Pokemon on the field by one stage, leading to the admin's first Pokemon in Roselia at level 40 with Poison Point and the moves Toxic, Leech Seed, Grass Knot, and Venoshock, acting as a slightly underpowered version of Brioni's ace that can also actually take advantage of Florges' ability, Flower Veil, granting Roselia immunity from both status lowering moves and status conditions, which seems like a pretty sweet deal if you ask me. Next up, Celosia will send in her new addition in Gothitelle with competitive in the moves Psychic, Tickle, Shadow Ball, and Charge Beam. And with the combo of competitive and Charge Beam, there are plenty of opportunities for setup potential on top of the nerfing move in Tickle. The Team Flare admin will then send out their second Pokemon in Manectric at level 40 with Static in the moves Discharge, Quick Attack, Flamethrower, and Thunder Wave for guaranteed paralysis. Since we took this poor pooch off of Celosia's team, I thought it would make sense to throw it onto the admin's team just for fun, as it could still work as an admin's mon. But wait, the fight is not over yet, because Celosia's got one more trick up her sleeve in Drapion at level 42 with Sniper and the moves Night Slash, Poison Fang, Ice Fang, and Acupressure to spice up the fight. With Drapion also being on her original team, I couldn't help but keep it on here, as it doesn't usually get a lot of use by trainers besides Aaron and the Elite Four of Sinnoh, and plus it fits the colorway of Celosia perfectly. And we'll go ahead and throw a Lumberry down here to keep it from getting statused. And that is the updated Team Flare Pokeball Factory double battle fight. I think we did a good job here of making this fight a little more difficult while having to get rid of Brioni as the second member here, and even being able to actually make use of a niche move in Flower Shield and a niche ability in Flower Veil. So next up, it's time for the player to be introduced to the final female scientist of Team Flare all the way in Frost Cavern, named Mabel, and her team upon first first glance is just as bad as the rest, only sporting a single mon that has a super bizarre moveset to boot. So here, we're gonna give Mabel the same treatment we've given the rest and buff up her team a bit, starting with our first new mon, you guessed it, a Florges. This time blue though, at level 47 with Flower Veil in the moves Calm Mind, Energy Ball, Wish, and Moonblast, as it just barely reaches that move on level up as a Floette by now. Next up is her somewhat significant previous team member, Houndoom, at level 46 with Early Bird and the moves Thunderfang for easy coverage, Foul Play, Fire Fang, and Will-O-Wisp for some fun utility. I know this isn't the craziest buff in moveset, but it's headed in the right direction and still has potential for improvement down the line. And last out is Mabel's other new inclusion in her Kingdra at level 48 with Sniper in the moves Dragon Pulse, Brine, Yawn, and Smokescreen for a callback to Claire's annoying yet powerful Kingdra of the past. Kingdra to me is a perfect inclusion as it fits the vibe of beauty and royalty that her previous team had been lacking. And for the item, I'm thinking a scope lens would really make this mon something to look out for, with its ability making crits way more powerful. And we're sticking at the original cap of 48 since the next gym leader Olympia's ace is right up there at 48 as well. And that is Mabel's upgraded first fight in Frost Cavern. This fight should act as a wake-up call to the player that the endgame is coming, as her team can be devastating if not prepared for correctly. So with all the scientists' introductions throughout the mid-game out of the way, it's time for the finale of the Team Flare plot to begin. And it all gets put into motion as soon as the player earns their 7th badge from Olympia and exits the gym, where their rival Serena or Callum will congratulate you. But all of a sudden, you both get a call on your X transceiver where Lysandre reveals to the world that he's a part of Team Flare and intends to fire the ultimate weapon. This prompts the player to immediately go back to Lumiose City to the cafe that we've seen him in before, only to find a couple of Team Flare grunts posing as servers trying to stop you from continuing. But after defeating them, you gain access to Lysandre Labs, and this is where the fun truly begins, because out of nowhere, Lysandre is waiting to battle you for the first time in the base game, right at the entrance. This is one of the best parts of his character, as he knew for a fact that the player would be able to track him down after making his announcement, so he thought, might as well take care of this kid as soon as possible. Great moment, Game Freak. So this battle will stay here as it acts as a fun way to throw the player off too. So now acting as the second time we fight him, but the first time we know that he's the leader of Team Flare, Lysandre will send out, instead of his Mienfoo, his now fully evolved Pangoro at level 47, with Iron Fist in the moves Crunch, Swords Dance, Hammer Arm, and Poison Jab for great coverage for any potential fairy type counters out there. And with Hammer Arm boosted by Iron Fist, this thing is going to do insane amounts of damage straight out of the gate. Next up, instead of Lysandre's Murkrow, he'll be sending out his story-relevant Sigilyph at level 47, still sporting the Tinted Lens ability, alongside the moves Psychic, Air Slash, Energy Ball, and Roost for massive recovery. An Energy Ball here acts as great coverage for the rest of the team. Speaking of which, Lysandre's next mon will still be Pyroar at level 48, with Rivalry in the moves Hyper Voice, Flamethrower, Dark Pulse, and Will-O-Wisp for good utility. In his original moveset, Fire Blast was more powerful, but I'd rather go for more consistent damage with Flamethrower being 100% accurate. And yeah, it's only got 3 moves in the base game, so like, what's the harm in throwing his status move on there too? And that just leaves his ace. Instead of Gyarados is Aggron at level 49, with Sturdy in the moves Earthquake, Iron Head, Rock Slide, and Rest. I know that his Mega Gyarados is somewhat iconic, but I think Aggron works better here, especially with me throwing Mega Gyarados onto Elite Four Seabolt's team in my Fixing the Kalos Elite Four video. According to its Pokédex entry, Aggron claims an entire mountain of its own, much like how Lysandre is attempting to claim Kalos as his own. I'm sure Lysandre and his new ace are aligned on their beliefs, and might as well make that Aggron a Chesto Resto set by adding a Chesto Berry here, which will also reactivate Sturdy in the process, making for an annoying yet difficult mon to get past. And that is Lysandre's improved, now second fight that introduces the player to the Team Flare endgame. Now it's time to take on the scientists again, and they are all found around here in Lysandre Labs in various rooms. But I think they could be used in a more interesting way here. Since there are so many scientists, why don't we do a little consolidating by combining them into double battles in the same vein as Mars and Jupiter at Spear Pillar, where our rival can act as our doubles partner. They almost do this in the base game anyways with Brioni and Celosia, but opt to make it 2 single fights in a row. So here, I'd pin Aliana and Celosia together being the first and third scientists, while Brioni and Mabel being the second and fourth scientists would make up the second fight. So let's go ahead and jump into the first, where in the base game, Aliana only uses a Mightyena and Drudagon, while Celosia has her Manectric and Drapion to boot. So here, let's go side by side, upgrading their teams as a double battle. First up, Aliana will send out her new addition first in Vespiquen at level 46 with pressure in the moves Attack Order, Defend Order, Heal Order, and Acrobatics for some great stab flying damage. And this Queen Bee will be paired up nicely with Celosia's Florges at level 47 with Flower Veil and the moves Aromatherapy, Light Screen, Toxic, and Moonblast to act as the support mon of the fight. After the Bee and Flower duo are taken down, Aliana will send out a Florges of her own at level 47, this time sporting a more offensive set in Calm Mind, Energy Ball, Wish, and Moonblast. This means Celosia's second mon is her Gothitelle at level 46 with competitive in the moves Psychic, Calm Mind, Shadow Ball, and Thunderbolt. These guys are meant to take advantage of the Light Screen and Toxic set up by the first Florges while being relatively tanky themselves already. Then comes both scientists' aces, starting with Aliana's in her Furfro at level 48 with Fur Coat in the moves Retaliate, Sucker Punch, Thunderwave, and Charm, acting as the ultimate weapon in the fight, as Retaliate doubles in damage when a previous team member has fallen on the last turn, while being able to do great utility in both Thunderwave and Charm, just in time for Celosia's absolute menace that is her Drapion at level 48 with Sniper in the moves Night Slash, Cross Poison, Ice Fang, and X Scissor. I know Cross Poison isn't learned here until a later level, but these Mon's movesets have a couple moves that aren't taught until later levels in the base game, so I figured it's fine to do the same here. And that's the new final double battle between Aliana and Celosia. And for the items, I figure an Oranberry wouldn't be very effective on Furfro anymore, so why not toss a Rocky Helmet on that bulky boy instead? And for Drapion, I think a Lumberry is enough to throw the player off if they try to status this all-out attacker. But that's not all for double battles, because right after your rival heals you up, Brioni and Mabel want a piece of that action. And with their base game final teams consisting of Liepard and Bishop for Brioni, and Houndoom and Weavile for Mabel, we've got a little too much dark types going on. But starting out on the new squad, Brioni will send out her Bisharp at level 46 with Defiant in the moves Night Slash, Iron Head, X Scissor, and Rock Tomb for excellent speed control, while Mabel sends out her Florges with the same set as Celosia's. The idea here is that Bisharp can turn 1 toss out a Rock Tomb to debuff the player's speed, while Florges can do some support with Light Screen or Toxic in the process. Then comes Brioni's Florges sporting the same set as Aliana's, taking on a more attack-heavy role, while Mabel sends out her Houndoom, still at level 46, with Early Bird, but with an upgraded moveset in Snarl, Flamethrower, Sludge Bomb, and Nasty Plot, with Snarl here hitting both opposing Pokemon for decent damage on top of a special attack drop. This offers great utility in nerfing the player's team. One thing that I found super interesting when researching the original teams for these scientists is that Mabel's Houndoom actually decreases in level between fights, as her Weavile becomes her ace in the second fight that takes place almost immediately after her first. But here, we've opted to keep their levels the same, and hopefully at some point, the AI will take advantage of the Florges' wish to switch in any damaged Pokemon, but it's hard to rely on good enemy AI, even up here in Gen 6. Then comes Brioni's ace in Roserade, now at level 48 with Poison Point and the moves Shadow Ball, Giga Drain, Leech Seed, and Venoshock. With a largely similar moveset here, the Roserade is meant to use the tried and true Venoshock method while staying alive with Giga Drain and Leech Seed. And that just leaves Mabel's lead in Kingdra at level 48 with Sniper and the moves Ice Beam, Waterfall, Yawn, and Dragon Dance. Now sporting a new mixed moveset with Dragon Dance, the player's gotta be careful with this one. And that is the second second Team Flare scientist battle with Brioni and Mabel. And for the items, I think we'll keep them the same here, with a big root on Roserade and scope lens on Kingdra. So after you and Serena or Calum take care of the female scientists, you're able to reach a cell where Lysandre is holding a very tall man named AZ, who tells you the story of his friendship with a Floette that he battled alongside with in a Pokemon war that ended the life of his Pokemon friend. That loss led to AZ creating a machine to resurrect his Floette, but even after getting his Pokemon back, his anger wasn't gone. So he turned his life-giving machine into the ultimate weapon that brought enough destruction to end the war for good. But after this weapon was used, his Floette ran away from him, leaving AZ alone for years, as the ultimate weapon granted him a much longer life that has allowed him to live for over 3,000 years. And I think the delivery of this story works just fine to give backstory behind the ultimate weapon, but I wish there was just a bit more here. Something that always bothered me about the fact that AZ, the human, was flawed in his thinking, but his Pokemon Floette was not. Thematically, it just comes off as thinking that Pokemon are perfect creatures, but I don't think we know that that can be true, just based on how, you know, nature works in the real world. But I do think that we should keep the fact that his Pokemon saw that he was doing something wrong, as it helps to show that the connection between human and Pokemon is really what these games are all about. So as a part of a little rewrite, let's say that AZ and his Floette were eyeing to be the king of the land that was once Kalos 3,000 years ago, and that they did some bad things to other people in power, Robin Hood style, to help reach kinghood. But one day, AZ had an idea to build the ultimate weapon to wipe out anyone that might oppose him from taking the crown. And while Floette wasn't perfect and aided AZ in a few crimes that might land in a gray area, at the end of the day, nobody kind was getting hurt. But building an ultimate weapon to straight up destroy his opposition, Floette was not okay with that. But AZ continued working on it, placing his said weapon within the kingdom walls, where the castle's Sigilyph could keep guard of it. So upon creation of said weapon, AZ aimed his machine towards his enemies and prepared for ignition. But Floette stood in his way, and AZ did not take this well, as he eventually fought through Floette's light screen and managed to set the weapon off, and in the process granted himself and Floette eternal life. But due to the damage AZ caused, Floette left him, never to be seen again. You see, now the bond between man and Pokemon is highlighted in a much more interesting way, where both man and Pokemon were in the wrong, but it was the Pokemon's actions that showed AZ how wrong he was. But anyways, after that monologue, Lysandre takes us to a new room with the last but certainly not least of the Team Flare scientists, Xerosic, who has been put in charge of activating the previously mentioned ultimate weapon to quote-unquote free Kalos of the foolish humans that plague it. And in the base game, his team isn't actually the worst, it just needs a bit of a bump to match it up with the upgrades I've given the rest of the team. So starting out, Xerosic gets a Florges of his own, with Flower Veil and the moves Calm Mind, Hyper Beam, Wish, and Moonblast, with Hyper Beam here being a fun reference to the ultimate weapon, resembling a Hyper Beam in and of itself. Next up is usually Xerosic's Crobat, who I've replaced with Volcarona at level 46 with Flame Body and the moves Quiver Dance, Flamethrower, Bug Buzz, and Hurricane for some interesting coverage. Xerosic is somewhat involved in the post-game plot revolving around Essentia, where it's mentioned that all of Essentia's Pokemon were given to her by Xerosic. And with Volcarona being one of the few given Pokemon here, I think this is a much better choice for his team, given how related it is to the ultimate weapon as a moth that was reborn from a simple larva. And finally is one of the best choices Game Freak brought to Team Flare, Xerosic's Ace, Malamar at level 48 with Contrary in the moves Superpower, Night Slash, Psycho Cut, and Hypnosis, with the only change here being Hypnosis over Retaliate for some potential sleep strats, which will only be more useful when throwing a wide lens on the squid to keep its Hypnosis more accurate. And that is Xerosic's new and improved team. With the matching Florges and upgraded team members, I think this version will be a little more intimidating for the player to defeat. And after doing doing so, as a reference to the Matrix for some odd reason, Xerosic will give you an empty choice where both the blue and red buttons will activate the ultimate weapon, and upon activation, you'll be prompted to go to the site in Xerosic Town, where Team Flare's HQ will be found. But I want to add a little bit more to this traversal though. As I alluded to in Lysander's first fight, Sigilyph are said to be guardians of an ancient city that always fly the same route while keeping watch for invaders. So here, I think it would be interesting if before leaving Xerosic, he'd explained that Lysander caught the alpha Sigilyph that can control the pack that surrounds Xerosic, adding to the lore of why he has a Sigilyph with a hidden ability. And upon arrival, you'd see a wild Sigilyph blocking anyone from trying to enter the town, as they viewed anyone trying to stop Team Flare as aggressive, and would even be a nice place for Looker to make a cameo with a few other police officers attempting to help out. So the player would have to quell a few wild Sigilyph to enter the town and move on into the HQ. And in the base game, this is where the player fights Lysander 2 times very close together. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut the first of the 2, especially since the player needs to battle a ton of admins leading up to the final fight, which I think suffices enough as is. So let's go ahead and skip to Lysander's finale in the room of the respective box legendary, where we see him use a mega evolution for the first time. And yeah, just like before, his team is decent enough as is, but there's so much more that we can do thematically, so we'll go ahead and give him a bit of a buff. First up again, instead of his Mienshao, his Pangoro will be making a reappearance at level 51 with Iron Fist and the moves Crunch, Parting Shot, Hammer Arm, and Poison Jab. Here, I've gone ahead and added the level up and signature move at the time, Parting Shot, that lowers the attack and special attack of the opponent by 1 stage before switching out, which works wonders on elite Pokemon to scout out the competition while debuffing them in the process of switching out into a better counter. Next out is, instead of his Honchkrow, Lysander's Sigilyph at level 51 with Tinted Lens and the moves Stored Power, Air Slash, Calm Mind, and Roost. With this set being wildly different from the last, the player needs to keep watch of this guy setting up Calm Minds, especially through Tinted Lens, as even after 2 Calm Minds, Stored Power's base power would be at 100. Next up is Lysander's Pyroar at level 51 with Rivalry, with the moves Hyper Voice, Flamethrower, Dark Pulse, and Will-O-Wisp. And yeah, there's really not much else I can add to the Lion on Lysander's final fight, as it's built pretty well here. So moving on, Lysander will add a 5th Mon to the team and a special little Golem in Golurk at level 52 with Iron Fist and the moves Earthquake, Ice Punch, Shadow Punch, and Thunder Punch for just an all-around great coverage attacker. I know it's kind of weird that we doubled up on Iron Fist Mons here, but Golurk is yet another Mon that fits Lysander's goals so well. Taking a look at the Pokédex, Lysander might pay more attention to its shield entry, where it explains that there's a theory that inside Golurk is a perpetual motion machine that produces limitless energy, and that he might have caught this Pokemon in hopes that it would have powered the reactivation of the ultimate weapon. And at the same time, when you look at its X entry, it said that Golurk were ordered to protect both Pokemon and people by the ancient people who made them, harkening back to that theme introduced earlier where the bond between Pokemon and people is what's important, not just the views of the people. And finally is Lysander's Ace, an Aggron capable of Mega Evolution at level 53 with Sturdy in the moves Thunder Wave, Curse, Heavy Slam, and Rock Slide. With a boost in stats with its Mega and its moveset in Curse and Heavy Slam, this thing is going to be a monster to defeat. And that is Lysander's final team that the player must fight. With a lot of new faces from his original team, I think we've done a good job at creating a more unique team that is still formidable to face. But once it's been done, I think it'd be a nice moment to show Aggron in pain after returning to its normal state, highlighting that Lysander had put his own beliefs over his bond with his Pokemon. But both here and in the base game, Lysander will choose to stay in the HQ as the ultimate weapon attacks itself, destroying it in the process. And most definitely killing Lysander too, right? Like, that's kind of crazy that Game Freak just did that in a kid's game. But anyways, there you have it. With Lysander being defeated, that marks the end of Team Flare's arc in Pokemon X and Y. I hope my changes have inspired you to look forward to what we might have in store for for Kalos's backstory in Pokemon Legends ZA, because I am super excited about it. And with Pokemon Day right around the corner, it doesn't seem like we'll be waiting long to see more about the game. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching all the way through. If you like what you saw, feel free to like and subscribe. And if you do anything different, be sure to leave a comment letting me know. Oh, and a special thanks to my channel members. You guys are obviously the best. And by the way, I've created a cheaper membership option for you guys, so if you'd like to support the channel, it's always appreciated. Anyways, I've been O Creations, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!